U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday he will impose an additional 25% tariff on imported cars and some auto parts.
Nations scrambling as U.S. President Donald Trump announced his plans for his long-promised tariffs on automotive imports.
Rather than engaging in a public battle of words or issuing political threats, Japan's response to the tariffs was to focus inward. The country's automakers, recognizing that direct retaliation would only further escalate tensions, chose to double down on innovation and production efficiency. Toyota, for example, fast-tracked its plans to develop and manufacture a new hybrid engine line that would be produced in Japan and exported globally. This wasn't just a response to the tariffs. It was an opportunity to reaffirm Japan's leadership in hybrid and electric vehicle technology. At the same time, Honda began shifting its production schedules and reducing its output in Mexico and Canada. The company strategically increased its investments in Southeast Asia, particularly in Thailand, where production costs were lower and the local market was expanding. This move was aimed at diversifying Japan's production base and reducing reliance on North American plants, which were now at risk due to the tariff barriers. Nissan, another key player in Japan's automotive sector, took a bold step forward by accelerating its electric vehicle production. The company had already been at the forefront of developing affordable, battery-powered vehicles, but now it doubled down on its commitment to bringing these vehicles to market faster. These compact electric vehicles were designed with the U.S. middle class in mind, offering affordability and fuel efficiency at a time when American automakers were still struggling with production delays and rising costs. These moves were not spontaneous. They were part of a much larger, long-term strategy that Japan had been planning for years. In fact, Japan had anticipated something like this happening as early as 2018, during the first round of Trump-era tariffs. This foresight had already prompted Japanese automakers to explore alternative production hubs, digital automation in domestic plants, and supply chain diversification. When the tariffs came, Japan's automakers were ready. They were prepared to shift their production away from North America, pivoting to Southeast Asia and other global markets to maintain their competitive edge. Rather than making rash decisions, Japan's automakers stayed focused on long-term goals. The country's response wasn't driven by emotion, but by careful strategic planning and innovation, setting the stage for a global auto industry that would continue to evolve in favor of Japanese leadership. Behind the scenes, the Japanese government played a pivotal role in coordinating Japan's strategic response to the tariffs. The Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, METI, was tasked with working closely with major automakers to assess the impact of the tariffs on Japan's automotive sector and to devise a set of countermeasures. The Japanese government's involvement was essential because the global automotive industry was undergoing rapid transformation, with electric vehicles, EVs, becoming the new battleground. Japan's commitment to sustainable transportation was already well established, and the tariffs gave the country an opportunity to accelerate its efforts in this direction. For instance, Toyota had been working on solid-state battery research for several years, positioning itself to be a global leader in this cutting-edge technology. Similarly, Honda had entered into a partnership with General Motors to share battery technology for their future electric vehicle platforms. The country's strong position in hybrid and battery technologies meant that Japan could not only weather the immediate impact of the tariffs, but also take control of the future of the auto industry. The government's approach was methodical, relying on a combination of diplomacy and economic leverage to help guide Japanese automakers through this turbulent period. METI officials also began to reach out to countries in Southeast Asia, such as Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia, which were eager to attract Japanese investment. These nations offered not just lower labor costs, but also growing local markets for vehicles that would be made in these countries. Japan's government understood that the automotive industry was changing at a rapid pace. The transition to electric vehicles would redefine the market and present new challenges and opportunities. By aligning governmental efforts with corporate strategies, Japan ensured that its automakers would not only survive the tariff crisis, but would continue to lead the global auto industry through technological innovation. As Japan's automakers scrambled to shift production from North America to other regions, the Southeast Asian market quickly became the new focus. Countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia were eager to welcome Japanese automotive investments, offering lower labor costs, favorable trade terms, and expanding domestic markets. For Japan, this pivot wasn't just about cost savings. It was about diversification and risk management. By expanding production in Southeast Asia, Japan reduced its reliance on North American production facilities that were now vulnerable to U.S. trade policy shifts. Moreover, Southeast Asia provided access to growing middle-class markets that would become crucial in the coming years as demand for affordable, fuel-efficient vehicles surged across the region. The production shifts also had strategic benefits. As Japanese automakers restructured their supply chains, they were able to tap into new markets while ensuring that their global logistics systems remained intact. By ramping up production in Southeast Asia, Japan ensured that it would not only weather the tariff storm, but would continue its dominance in the global auto market. These tactical moves by Japan's automotive giants were calculated and designed to ensure that Japan's position in the global auto industry would remain strong, no matter the challenges that arose from U.S. tariffs or trade disruptions. As the world's largest automakers shifted their focus to emerging markets, Southeast Asia became an essential part of Japan's long-term growth strategy. As the U.S. government imposed tariffs on vehicles imported from Mexico and Canada, the intended purpose was clear: to encourage domestic manufacturing in the United States and bring auto production back to American soil. However, the unintended consequences of these tariffs quickly became evident, not only affecting Japan, but also having ripple effects across the entire global automotive industry. The U.S. consumer market, which had been a significant source of sales for Japanese automakers, was suddenly faced with higher prices, longer wait times, and fewer vehicle options. This was a direct result of the tariffs, which raised the cost of vehicles, particularly those coming from Mexico and Canada, where many Japanese companies had established production facilities. But perhaps the most striking unintended consequence was the lack of impact on American automakers. The tariffs, designed to boost U.S. manufacturing, didn't translate into a clear advantage for domestic car brands. In fact, the price hikes caused by the tariffs didn't result in a significant boost to the sales of American-made vehicles. U.S. consumers still gravitated toward Japanese vehicles, drawn to their reliability, fuel efficiency, and lower total cost of ownership. While Japanese automakers faced the brunt of the tariffs' financial burden, they found ways to maintain their market share through strategic adjustments and innovation. This left the U.S. market with a growing gap between demand for Japanese vehicles and the ability of American automakers to meet that demand. The reality was that Japanese cars were still perceived as superior in terms of quality, fuel efficiency, and value for money, key attributes that U.S. consumers valued highly, regardless of trade barriers. In the U.S. economy, many local parts suppliers and dealerships that depended on Japanese manufacturers for production and sales faced disruptions. In states like Michigan, where a significant number of small suppliers relied on orders from Japanese automakers, the tariffs caused reduced order volumes, leading to job insecurity and economic stress. Similarly, in Texas, where Toyota had one of its major North American headquarters, local officials voiced concerns that prolonged trade friction could negatively impact both state revenue and employment. While the U.S. government intended to stimulate domestic manufacturing, the impact of tariffs on the global supply chain was far more complicated. The rise in prices and fewer choices for consumers, combined with the lack of significant gains for American manufacturers, made the U.S. auto market less predictable. These tariffs not only failed to achieve their goal of boosting American-made cars, but they also showed how interconnected the global auto industry truly was. Punishing one part of the chain had unintended consequences that affected both U.S. consumers and businesses alike. While the U.S. focused on tariff imposition and political confrontation, Japan adopted a more subtle, strategic approach to address the fallout. Japanese automakers were not interested in engaging in a loud media war or participating in political squabbles. Instead, their response was measured, focusing on innovation, production shifts, and supply chain diversification. Rather than playing a defensive game, Japan focused on reaffirming its leadership in the global automotive market, doubling down on technological advancement and global market expansion. Nissan, for example, made a bold decision to focus on affordable electric vehicles, EVs. The company had already been at the forefront of developing electric mobility solutions, but now it accelerated the production timeline for its compact, fuel-efficient EVs. These vehicles were specifically designed to meet the needs of middle-income U.S. buyers, where American automakers were still struggling to keep pace with price and efficiency. By accelerating the timeline for these EV models, Nissan was not just reacting to tariffs, but leveraging them as an opportunity to increase its presence in the American electric vehicle market, a market that was rapidly expanding. Toyota also responded by focusing on hybrids, a segment where Japan had long maintained a competitive edge. The company shifted production of its hybrid models from Mexico to Japan and Thailand, ensuring that its hybrid cars could still reach U.S. consumers, despite the tariffs. This strategic move allowed Toyota to stay ahead of the curve in the hybrid market, while also mitigating the impact of tariffs on its supply chain. Honda, too, increased its focus on battery electric platforms and domestic production, while simultaneously enhancing its partnerships in global battery technology development. Instead of merely responding to the tariffs with defensive actions, Japan's automotive giants were actively positioning themselves for future growth. Their strategy involved a combination of investments in new technologies, shifts in production hubs, and reduced dependence on U.S. plants that were vulnerable to political shifts. They also avoided public political confrontations, focusing instead on delivering superior products to consumers. Japan's response wasn't just about surviving the tariff battle. It was about turning adversity into opportunity. By focusing on innovation, flexibility, and strategic partnerships, Japan's automakers ensured that they remained competitive in the face of mounting trade barriers. In March 2025, the Bank of Japan, BOJ, convened a pivotal meeting to assess the nation's monetary policy amidst rising inflation and global uncertainties. The discussions revealed a division among policymakers regarding the timing of potential interest rate hikes. Some members advocated for immediate action, citing domestic inflationary pressures, particularly from food costs and wage growth, which had sustained inflation above the BOJ's 2% target for nearly 3 years. Conversely, others expressed caution, highlighting the risks associated with U.S. tariff policies under the Trump administration, which could adversely affect Japan's export-dependent economy. Ultimately, the BOJ maintained interest rates at 0.5%, with Governor Kazuo Ueda emphasizing the need to navigate global economic uncertainties carefully. Facing mounting public concern over escalating prices, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba pledged to implement robust measures to counteract inflation. In a meeting with Tetsuo Saito, leader of the coalition partner Komeito, Ishiba committed to utilizing existing policy frameworks, including the current fiscal year's supplementary budget and the draft budget for the upcoming fiscal year, to address the issue without introducing new expenditures. Saito conveyed that Ishiba aimed to swiftly introduce these measures following the passage of the next fiscal year's budget. These initiatives were perceived as a strategic effort to bolster public support ahead of the House of Councilors election, amid declining approval ratings due to previous controversial policies. The BOJ's March meeting underscored the institution's vigilance concerning food-driven inflationary pressures and the potential impact of U.S. trade policies. Policymakers acknowledged that rising food prices, especially staples like rice, had significantly contributed to sustained inflation. Governor Ueda highlighted the necessity of monitoring U.S. tariff developments, given their potential to introduce volatility into global markets and pose challenges to Japan's economic stability. The BOJ emphasized its readiness to adjust monetary policy proactively, including the possibility of raising interest rates, to achieve and maintain its inflation target, despite potential financial implications. In response to persistent inflation and to stimulate economic growth, Prime Minister Ishiba's administration unveiled a $250 billion economic stimulus package. This comprehensive plan aimed to boost individual incomes and spur economic activity through various measures, including investments in digital innovation and semiconductors, allocating funds to enhance technological capabilities and competitiveness. Cash handouts and energy subsidies, providing direct financial support to low-income households to alleviate the burden of rising living costs. Tax reforms, proposing an increase in the minimum salary threshold for income tax, potentially encouraging greater workforce participation, particularly among women. While these measures were designed to address immediate economic challenges, they also sparked debates regarding fiscal responsibility and the potential for increased income inequality. The stimulus package highlighted the administration's commitment to achieving sustainable wage growth and economic revitalization, even as it navigated complex political dynamics following a loss of majority in the lower house of parliament. The announcement of Prime Minister Ishiba's anti-inflation measures had a positive impact on financial markets. The Nikkei 225 index rose by 0.7%, or 246.75 points, closing at 38,027.29. This uptick reflected investor optimism regarding the government's proactive stance on economic challenges. However, market participants remained cautious, closely monitoring the implementation and effectiveness of the proposed measures, as well as potential global economic developments, including U.S. trade policies and their implications for Japan's export-driven economy.
The markets ended the week with a significant sell-off amid concerns over President Trump's incoming tariffs and inflation.
As you can see, Tesla shares continue their move to the downside this morning, a reverse of fortune for the car maker after 5 straight winning sessions.
Once the undisputed leader in the electric vehicle market across the continent, Tesla now finds itself under severe pressure. The company's European sales have collapsed in recent months, and the numbers are hard to ignore. In Germany, a key market for Tesla, sales plummeted by an astounding 76%. In February 2024, Tesla managed to sell only 1,429 units, a stark contrast to the 6,380 units sold in February 2023. This sharp decline in sales is not a one-off issue. Other major European markets are facing similar drops. In France, Norway, Spain, and Denmark, Tesla's market share has been drastically eroded, with sales dropping by 44%, 45%, 44%, and 48%, respectively. Even in the Netherlands, traditionally one of Tesla's strongest European markets, sales fell by 34%. What's behind these figures? The decline in Tesla's market share is particularly concerning because Tesla has been synonymous with electric vehicles, EVs, in Europe. The company was seen as the trailblazer in the electric car revolution, with the Model S and Model 3 leading the charge in the push for sustainability and innovation. However, the landscape has changed dramatically. Tesla is no longer the dominant force it once was, and the reasons are multifaceted. The first major factor contributing to Tesla's decline in Europe is Elon Musk's political involvement. Musk has become a highly divisive figure due to his close ties with U.S. President Donald Trump and his public support for far-right political parties in Europe, most notably the AfD party in Germany. This has led to significant backlash, particularly among left-leaning and center-right voters who view Musk's political stances as a threat to the values they hold dear. Musk's praise for the AfD, a party known for its populist and far-right rhetoric, sparked anger across Europe and caused many potential Tesla buyers to rethink their decisions. A survey conducted in Germany revealed that 94% of over 100,000 respondents said they would never buy a Tesla again due to Musk's political views. This political fallout has created a boycott culture against Tesla, especially in countries where political alignment plays a crucial role in consumer decision-making. But Musk's political involvement is only part of the story. Another significant factor behind Tesla's plummeting sales in Europe is the trade tensions between the U.S. and the European Union. Under Trump's administration, the U.S. imposed significant tariffs on European goods, including cars, which has had a ripple effect on the automotive market. Tesla's European sales were hit hard by these tariffs, and consumers began to turn to local automakers instead, who offered EVs at similar prices. Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes, for instance, introduced new competitive electric models, which quickly gained traction in the market. To add to the pressure, Tesla's pricing strategy in Europe has been inconsistent. In the US, Musk aggressively slashed prices to drive demand. However, in Europe, Tesla's pricing remained relatively stable, and in some cases, the company didn't offer significant price cuts. As a result, consumers began to look for alternatives from established brands that could offer similar features at competitive prices. While Tesla's sales in Europe continue to suffer, another major factor contributing to its struggles is the rise of competitors both from Europe and China. On the European side, traditional automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz have been pushing hard to capture the electric vehicle market. Volkswagen's ID series, BMW's I models, and Mercedes-Benz's EQ lineup are all state-of-the-art vehicles that provide consumers with an alternative to Tesla's offerings. These companies are not only well-established brands with loyal customer bases, but they also have the advantage of local production and a strong European identity that appeals to many consumers. Moreover, these brands have been aggressively expanding their EV offerings and are quickly catching up with Tesla's innovation. Tesla's once unmatched position as the leader in the EV space is now under direct threat from these European giants. However, the biggest threat to Tesla's European market share is BYD, the Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer. BYD, which stands for Build Your Dreams, has experienced remarkable growth and is rapidly becoming one of the world's largest EV manufacturers. BYD's sales in Europe have surged, with the company's affordable yet technologically advanced electric vehicles appealing to a broad range of consumers. BYD has captured a significant portion of the market, particularly in countries like Germany and France, where it is now positioning itself as a direct competitor to Tesla. What sets BYD apart is not just its competitive pricing, but also its innovative approach. BYD has invested heavily in both battery technology and manufacturing capabilities, allowing it to offer cost-effective EVs without compromising on quality. As Tesla continues to grapple with declining sales, BYD's strong presence in Europe and other international markets positions it as a formidable competitor in the electric vehicle race. The tariffs imposed by Donald Trump have also had a profound impact on Tesla's global operations. In 2025, Trump introduced a 25% tariff on vehicles produced outside the U.S., with the goal of revitalizing domestic manufacturing. While this policy was aimed at boosting U.S. production, it has had the unintended consequence of driving up production costs for automakers, particularly those like Tesla, which rely on international supply chains. For Tesla, the tariffs have meant higher costs for raw materials, as well as increased production costs for vehicles manufactured outside the U.S. These tariffs have created a major headache for Tesla's European operations, as it now faces a more expensive supply chain and has to contend with rising vehicle prices that could alienate potential buyers. While Trump has defended these tariffs as part of his broader strategy to support domestic manufacturing and bring jobs back to the U.S., the reality is that these tariffs could disrupt the global supply chain, raising vehicle prices and limiting availability. The price hikes resulting from the tariffs could make Tesla's cars less affordable for consumers, further diminishing the company's competitive edge in the European market. As we look at Tesla's future, it's important to acknowledge that the global race to dominate the electric vehicle market is becoming more intense than ever. While Tesla has been the leader in the EV revolution, new competitors are emerging rapidly, particularly in China. BYD, with its explosive growth and focus on hybrids and EVs, is quickly becoming Tesla's most formidable rival. The Chinese company has set ambitious goals for international expansion, with a target of selling 800,000 cars internationally by 2025. At the same time, Tesla continues to innovate, with cutting-edge technologies like autonomous driving and advanced battery systems. But the competition is fierce, and Tesla's market share is increasingly being threatened by both traditional automakers and new EV startups. While Tesla has long been the pioneer in the electric vehicle space, its once untouchable position is being challenged by a new wave of innovators. One of the most notable developments in the race for EV supremacy is Tesla's expansion into Saudi Arabia. The Middle Eastern country, long known for its reliance on oil, has begun to invest heavily in renewable energy and electric vehicles. Tesla's move into Saudi Arabia signals a major shift as the kingdom recognizes the importance of diversifying its energy economy. Tesla's entry into this market could open new doors for growth, especially in the face of growing competition from BYD and other players in the region. Donald Trump's economic policies have been central to the shifting dynamics of the global automotive market. In addition to his tariffs on foreign-made cars, Trump has also advocated for tax incentives to encourage consumers to buy U.S.-made vehicles. These policies are part of his larger goal of revitalizing U.S. manufacturing, but they could also create long-term challenges for Tesla, especially given its reliance on international production. The 25% tariff on imported cars has already begun to have serious implications for companies like Tesla, which source many of their components from abroad. The impact of these tariffs could increase vehicle prices and reduce vehicle availability in the U.S., which would affect Tesla's competitiveness against domestic automakers like Ford and General Motors. Despite the challenges, Trump's policies may provide Tesla with opportunities in the long run, especially if the company can take advantage of the incentives for U.S. manufacturing. However, Tesla must navigate the geopolitical landscape carefully to avoid further alienating international customers and investors. Looking ahead, Tesla's future remains uncertain as it faces mounting competition and ongoing political pressures. On the one hand, Tesla's innovations in autonomous driving, battery technology, and vehicle design continue to keep it at the forefront of the electric vehicle revolution. But the company must also contend with growing competition from both traditional automakers and Chinese EV giants like BYD. Tesla's stock price has been volatile, dropping by 28% in the past month, but this does not necessarily mean the company is finished. Tesla's expansion into new markets like Saudi Arabia could provide it with a much-needed boost, especially as the country moves towards sustainable energy solutions. However, the company must remain agile in the face of rising competition from both established brands and newcomers. As Tesla navigates the future, the question remains: can Tesla continue to lead the charge in the global EV market, or will it be overtaken by competitors like BYD? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the electric vehicle market is rapidly evolving, and the race for dominance is far from over. The impact of President Donald Trump's auto tariffs extends beyond U.S. borders, significantly affecting Tesla's international operations. In Canada, the government has taken decisive actions in response to these tariffs. Transport Minister Chrystia Freeland announced a freeze on all rebate payments to Tesla and barred the company from participating in future electric vehicle (EV) incentive programs. This decision stems from a combination of trade tensions and concerns over the rapid increase in rebate claims, including a notable instance where a single Tesla dealership in Quebec City submitted claims for nearly 20 million Canadian dollars in sales over a single weekend. The Canadian government's actions underscore the global ramifications of U.S. trade policies, highlighting how tariffs intended to protect domestic industries can lead to retaliatory measures and disrupt international business operations. For Tesla, these developments mean not only lost incentives, but also potential damage to its reputation and market share in key international markets. In response to the evolving trade landscape, Tesla faces the imperative to adapt its strategies to mitigate the adverse effects of tariffs and maintain its competitive edge. One potential avenue is to increase domestic production within the U.S., thereby reducing reliance on international supply chains vulnerable to tariffs. However, this shift requires significant investment in manufacturing capabilities and may not provide an immediate buffer against existing tariffs. Additionally, Tesla could explore diversifying its supply chain by sourcing components from countries less affected by U.S. tariffs or negotiating favorable trade terms with suppliers. Such strategies aim to balance cost structures and supply chain resilience, ensuring that Tesla can continue to offer competitive pricing without compromising on quality or innovation. The intersection of political dynamics and economic policies presents both challenges and opportunities for Tesla. CEO Elon Musk's involvement in the Trump administration's initiatives, particularly those aimed at reducing federal spending, has placed his companies under scrutiny. While these efforts align with broader governmental goals, they have also led to backlash and concerns about potential conflicts of interest, affecting public perception and investor confidence. To navigate these complex challenges, Tesla must strategically manage its public relations, ensuring that its corporate actions align with regulatory expectations and public sentiment. This involves transparent communication, ethical business practices, and a commitment to contributing positively to the communities in which it operates. Looking ahead, Tesla's trajectory will be influenced by its ability to adapt to changing trade policies, innovate in product development, and maintain a strong brand reputation amidst political and economic fluctuations. The electric vehicle industry is at a pivotal juncture, with traditional automakers accelerating their EV initiatives and new entrants introducing innovative solutions. Tesla's continued leadership will depend on its capacity to anticipate market trends, invest in research and development, and forge strategic partnerships that enhance its technological and market position. In summary, Tesla's journey through the complexities of international trade, political affiliations, and market competition requires a dynamic and multifaceted approach. By proactively addressing these challenges and leveraging its strengths, Tesla can navigate the evolving automotive landscape and continue to drive the transition to sustainable transportation globally. In conclusion, Tesla's future is uncertain as it faces mounting challenges from both political tensions and increasing competition. While the company remains a leader in electric vehicle innovation, it's clear that it cannot ignore the growing threats from both traditional automakers and Chinese EV giants like BYD. As Trump's tariffs continue to reshape the global automotive market and Elon Musk's political involvement alienates more and more customers, Tesla's path forward will require a strategic shift. Whether or not the company can adapt to these challenges remains to be seen. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on the latest developments in the world of business, politics, and technology. We'll see you in the next video.
And this is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack on the very workers that I stood in front.
Leaders of some of America's biggest trading partners, said another way, some of America's closest allies, are reacting and preparing to retaliate this morning, now after President Trump announced 25% tariffs coming next week on all cars shipped to the United States.
Trump's decision to impose tariffs on goods from foreign countries was one of his most controversial moves as president. But why did he do it? In essence, tariffs are taxes on imports, designed to make foreign goods more expensive and encourage consumers to buy domestic products. President Trump argued that such a policy would protect American industries from the unfair practices of other nations, particularly China. His administration claimed that China's trade practices, from intellectual property theft to the unfair devaluation of their currency, had led to a trade imbalance that put the U.S. at a disadvantage. At the heart of the trade war, China was a primary target. In 2018, Trump imposed tariffs on over $250 billion worth of Chinese goods. This sparked a fierce reaction from China, which retaliated by imposing its own tariffs on U.S. exports, particularly targeting agricultural products. For example, China imposed tariffs on soybeans, a major U.S. export, which caused serious economic distress in Midwest farming communities. But the U.S.-China trade war was not the only conflict that Trump's tariffs sparked. His move also rattled U.S. allies like Mexico and Canada. As two of America's closest trading partners, both countries had reason to feel the pinch from Trump's trade policies. Mexico, for instance, had to contend with tariffs on steel and aluminum, two key exports. Similarly, Canada, which relies heavily on the U.S. as an export market, saw tariffs on goods ranging from lumber to dairy products. In fact, both Canada and Mexico retaliated almost immediately. They imposed tariffs on key U.S. exports, including bourbon whiskey, peanut butter, and motorcycles. These retaliations not only harmed specific U.S. industries, but also set the stage for a global trade conflict, leaving many wondering if these tensions could escalate into something far worse. The most recent chapter in Trump's tariff saga came in 2025, when he announced 25% tariffs on imported cars and auto parts. On the surface, this seemed like a move to protect the American automotive industry from foreign competition. especially imports from countries like Mexico, Canada, Japan, and the European Union. Trump justified these tariffs by claiming that foreign-made cars posed a national security threat, an argument that many analysts found dubious. The economic repercussions of these auto tariffs were immediate and severe. Experts have projected that car prices in the U.S. could rise by $5,000 to $10,000 per vehicle. The ripple effect from these tariffs is significant. From higher car prices to potential disruptions in the automotive manufacturing process, the fallout could be felt across the entire economy. In fact, economists warn that the average price of a new car could spike by up to $20,000 due to the increase in parts costs. This is particularly concerning, as American consumers have already been dealing with rising costs of living and stagnant wages. The tariffs have a direct impact on U.S. automakers as well. Many of the parts used in U.S. car production come from abroad. For example, a significant percentage of the auto parts used by manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler come from places like Mexico and China. When these tariffs are imposed, automakers are forced to absorb the costs, passing them on to consumers. This is a lose-lose situation. Consumers end up paying more, and automakers face the challenge of reducing profit margins. Moreover, the tariffs could stymie the efforts of U.S. automakers to compete in international markets, where foreign automakers will still be able to sell their products at competitive prices, unaffected by Trump's tariff policies. Additionally, the used car market in the U.S. will likely see its own inflationary pressures. With new car prices soaring, consumers will be forced to turn to used cars as an alternative, driving up prices in that market as well. For many families who are already struggling financially, the increase in car prices could have long-term consequences on their purchasing decisions and ability to maintain their vehicles. In the wake of Trump's tariff announcements, the global financial markets reacted with extreme volatility. In fact, Trump's tariffs on steel, aluminum, and now automobiles have been described as the catalyst for massive stock sell-offs. According to reports from Seatrade Maritime, the announcement of these tariffs triggered a sharp decline in global stock prices. Investors, worried about the broader economic implications, scrambled to sell off shares, particularly those related to industries most affected by the tariffs, such as manufacturing, automotive, and technology sectors. On the U.S. stock market, the effects were equally striking. The S&P 500, a key indicator of the health of the U.S. economy, saw sharp drops, particularly after Trump's announcement of the auto tariffs. Global market uncertainty is a critical concern for investors, as the tariffs threaten to disrupt established supply chains, especially in the automotive and steel industries. This led to concerns that the global economy could be heading toward a slowdown as the tariffs increase the cost of doing business and reduce the global flow of goods. However, the stock market's reaction was not uniform. Some analysts believe that short-term panic over the tariffs could give way to more stable long-term growth. Others, however, point to the volatile nature of Trump's trade policies and suggest that this economic uncertainty could persist for years, especially if the trade war continues to escalate. In the broader picture, some countries are also at risk of suffering economic slowdowns due to the ripple effects of these tariffs. Emerging markets, in particular, face the threat of currency devaluation, inflationary pressures, and lower growth rates as they become embroiled in the trade conflict. Global supply chains are becoming increasingly fragmented, which could lead to disruptions in production and logistics, further exacerbating economic difficulties. Now let's talk about the real-world consequences for consumers. The tariffs imposed by Trump's administration are not just affecting the upper echelons of the economy, they are hitting everyday consumers hard. The cost of living in the U.S. has been steadily increasing, and the imposition of tariffs on goods such as cars, electronics, and raw materials only makes things worse. Americans are already dealing with wage stagnation, and now they are facing higher prices for basic goods. Within hours of the policy rollout, Ferrari said it will raise prices by as much as 10% for some models to compensate for the tariffs. This isn't just a temporary increase. Long-term car price inflation could price many buyers out of the market entirely, especially those in lower income brackets. The ripple effects also extend to the used car market, as demand for pre-owned vehicles increases, leading to higher prices across the board. But the impact doesn't stop at cars. Tariffs on goods such as steel and aluminum could lead to higher prices for construction materials, appliances, and even electronics. Consumers may find themselves paying more for everything, from washing machines to smartphones. The increases in prices are likely to be most severe for households already living paycheck to paycheck, as they will feel the effects more acutely than wealthier Americans. Looking ahead, the future of global trade is uncertain. Trump's tariffs are undoubtedly having a major impact on the U.S. economy. But what about the rest of the world? Will countries like China and Mexico continue to retaliate? Or will they come to the negotiating table for a deal? Will the tariffs cause permanent damage to global supply chains and international relations? One of the key questions facing the world today is whether the global trade system, as it currently exists, will survive these kinds of unilateral policies. Free trade has been a cornerstone of global economic growth for decades. But Trump's tariffs represent a stark departure from this model. The future could see a fragmented global trade system, with countries choosing to protect their own industries, rather than cooperate on a global scale. New trade alliances may emerge as countries band together to counterbalance the U.S.'s aggressive tariff policies. But the real question is whether this will lead to greater cooperation or further fragmentation. What is clear is that Trump's tariffs have left a lasting mark on global trade, and nations will have to find ways to navigate this shifting landscape in the coming years. The global economic landscape is undergoing significant transformations as nations respond to President Donald Trump's recent tariff announcements. Canada, a long-standing ally of the United States, finds itself reevaluating its economic and trade strategies in light of these developments. Concurrently, investors worldwide are flocking to gold, viewing it as a safe haven asset amidst escalating trade tensions and market volatility. In the wake of President Trump's announcement of 25% tariffs on auto imports, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has articulated a firm stance, indicating that Canada is prepared to implement retaliatory measures. Carney emphasized that Canada's response would be strategically designed to maximize economic impact on the U.S., while minimizing domestic repercussions. He stated, "We will fight the U.S. tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada." Highlighting the gravity of the situation, Carney remarked that the traditional economic and security relationship between Canada and the U.S. may have irrevocably changed due to these tariffs. He noted, "Nothing is off the table to defend our workers and our country." To bolster Canada's economic resilience, Carney is advocating for the removal of internal trade barriers, aiming to enhance domestic trade efficiency. This initiative includes harmonizing regulations and establishing common national standards, with the goal of reducing trade costs by up to 15% and potentially boosting the economy by 4% to 8%. The announcement of new U.S. tariffs has sent ripples through global financial markets, prompting investors to seek refuge in gold. Gold prices have surged to unprecedented levels, with spot gold climbing to a record high of $3,077.56 per ounce. This surge is attributed to heightened demand for safe haven assets, amid fears of an escalating global trade war and its potential economic ramifications. Analysts suggest that the confluence of trade uncertainties, potential interest rate cuts, and geopolitical tensions has created a favorable environment for gold. Kyle Rada, a financial market analyst at Capital.com, observed, "Gold has the wind at its back at the moment. U.S. trade policy, U.S. fiscal policy, geopolitics, and a growth slowdown. Everything is blowing in gold's direction." Investor sentiment is further bolstered by the anticipation of continued central bank purchases and a weaker U.S. dollar, both of which contribute to gold's appeal as a hedge against inflation and currency fluctuations. Some analysts predict that gold prices could reach $3,100 per ounce, with ongoing trade tensions and economic risks supporting this bullish outlook. The unfolding trade disputes between the U.S. and its major trading partners, notably Canada, are reshaping global trade dynamics. Canada's strategic pivot towards reducing dependence on the U.S. and seeking alternative trade partnerships signifies a substantial shift in North American economic relations. This realignment may have long-term implications for supply chains, investment flows, and geopolitical alliances. Simultaneously, the surge in gold prices reflects broader market sentiments of caution and risk aversion. Investors' flight to gold underscores concerns over economic stability and the potential for inflationary pressures resulting from trade-induced supply constraints. As central banks and institutional investors increase their gold holdings, the precious metal's role as a cornerstone of financial security is reaffirmed. In conclusion, Trump's tariffs have created significant tensions between nations, pushing countries like Mexico, Canada, and China into retaliatory stances. These decisions have already caused stock market instability, price hikes, and economic slowdowns, affecting both businesses and consumers. The auto tariffs, in particular, threaten to disrupt the automotive industry and leave everyday consumers with higher prices for both new and used cars. Looking ahead, the future of global trade seems increasingly uncertain as countries grapple with the long-term consequences of these trade wars. What is clear, however, is that we are at the precipice of a new era in global commerce, one where economic protectionism could become the norm. Thank you for watching today's video. Please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more in-depth analyses on global economic issues and their impact on the world. These decisions have already caused stock market instability, price hikes, and economic slowdowns, affecting both businesses and consumers. The auto tariffs, in particular, threaten to disrupt the automotive industry and leave everyday consumers with higher prices for both new and used cars. Looking ahead, the future of global trade seems increasingly uncertain as countries grapple with the long-term consequences of these trade wars. What is clear, however, is that we are at the precipice of a new era in global commerce, one where economic protectionism could become the norm. Thank you for watching today's video. Please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more in-depth analyses on global economic issues and their impact on the world. As tensions with the United States intensified, Canada found itself at a crossroads, faced with the uncomfortable reality of an increasingly unpredictable neighbor. With growing doubts about the U.S.'s reliability as a partner, Canada was forced to reconsider its defense and trade strategies. The relationship, once built on decades of close cooperation, was now fraying at the seams due to aggressive U.S. tariffs, threats to Canadian sovereignty, and Trump's foreign policy volatility. In response, Canada sought to diversify its defense and trade partnerships, with a specific focus on reducing its historical dependence on the United States. In particular, the Canadian government began to look more closely at Europe and Asia for alternative defense collaborations, trade agreements, and technology exchanges. This marked a fundamental shift in Canada's geopolitical strategy, which had been heavily influenced by its neighbor for generations. This shift was evident in Canada's commitment to modernizing its defense systems, particularly in terms of air defense and naval power. For example, Canada announced a monumental plan to invest 60 billion Canadian dollars, approximately 42 billion US dollars, to upgrade and replace its aging fleet of submarines, many of which were increasingly seen as inadequate for modern threats, especially in the Arctic. The new fleet was designed to enhance Canada's ability to monitor and defend its northern borders, which were becoming more vulnerable due to the melting ice in the Arctic and growing international interest in its natural resources. One of the most tangible signs of this shift came in the form of Canada's partnership with France, a European power with which Canada had been seeking to strengthen military ties. In 2024, the FS Teville, a French nuclear-powered attack submarine, docked in Halifax, Nova Scotia, just 300 miles from the U.S. border. This visit was part of the French Barracuda-class submarine's cold water performance tests, but also served as a powerful demonstration of French naval technology and operational expertise. The FS Teville is a part of France's Barracuda program, which focuses on the construction of long-range nuclear-powered submarines designed for intelligence gathering and operating in cold waters, a feature that is increasingly important for Canada's own defense needs in the Arctic. This docking was the first time a French nuclear submarine had visited Canada in recent years, and it set the stage for deeper defense cooperation between the two nations. This strategic partnership with France goes beyond a single submarine visit. The Royal Canadian Navy, RCN, is now planning to modernize its submarine fleet, with an eye on acquiring between 6 and 12 new submarines by 2035. The French Naval Group, the company that built the FS Teville, is among the contenders for the contract to supply these new submarines, which will be crucial for Canada's ability to maintain its defense capabilities in the Arctic. The French submarine visit and the subsequent strengthening of defense ties between Canada and France signal a significant shift in Canada's defense strategy. It marks a clear diversification of military partnerships beyond its traditional reliance on the U.S. In addition to upgrading its naval capabilities, Canada has made cutting-edge technological investments a central part of its defense modernization strategy. One of the most significant developments in this regard has been the $4.2 billion USD investment in an over-the-horizon radar system developed by Australia. This advanced radar system, known as the Jindalee Operational Radar Network, JORN, will greatly enhance Canada's ability to monitor and defend its vast Arctic region, which has become an area of increasing strategic importance. The JORN radar system works by bouncing radar waves off the ionosphere, allowing it to detect and track aircraft and maritime vessels at distances of up to 3,000 kilometers, far beyond the range of traditional radar systems. This technology is essential for tracking potential threats across the remote northern territories of Canada, an area that has traditionally been difficult to monitor. The acquisition of JORN radar marks a decisive step toward Canada's greater defense autonomy. It reduces Canada's reliance on US-built military technologies and strengthens the country's ability to defend its sovereignty in the face of growing geopolitical challenges, particularly in the Arctic. This is a clear sign that Canada is recalibrating its defense priorities in response to the unpredictable US foreign policy and the evolving security landscape in the Arctic region. Canada's decision to acquire JORN radar technology is part of its broader strategy to reduce its reliance on the US and to invest in sovereign defense capabilities that are tailored to its own national security interests. Another significant signal of Canada's shifting defense strategy is its reassessment of the F-35 fighter jet contract with the United States. In 2023, Canada signed a deal with Lockheed Martin to purchase 88 F-35 jets for $19 billion. However, due to the growing tensions with the US and concerns over President Trump's policies, Canada is now reconsidering whether the F-35 is the right fit for its defense needs. The F-35 is a stealth fighter jet designed to provide cutting-edge air defense capabilities. However, the uncertainty surrounding US foreign policy and its potential impact on NATO alliances have led Canada to question whether it should continue with the F-35 program. Recent developments, such as Portugal's cancellation of its own F-35 acquisition, have added fuel to these concerns. The F-35 controversy highlights a growing shift in the way Canada views its military procurement. Canada, traditionally a strong ally of the US, is now looking at alternatives to US-made military technology, signaling a broader realignment of its defense priorities. Canada's reassessment of the F-35 contract is a clear indication that the country is moving away from US-led military initiatives and seeking to diversify its defense partnerships with other nations that offer more stability and alignment with Canada's national interests. The Arctic region has become a central focus of Canada's national defense strategy. With the effects of climate change causing the ice to melt, there is growing international interest in the Arctic's vast natural resources, such as oil, gas, and minerals. As the ice recedes, the Arctic is increasingly becoming a focal point for geopolitical competition, particularly from Russia, which has made aggressive moves in the region. For Canada, the Arctic represents not just an environmental challenge, but a strategic priority. The country's sovereignty over its northern territories is at risk, and the growing interest in Arctic resources makes it even more vulnerable to territorial incursions from external actors, especially Russia. In response, Canada has doubled down on its commitment to defend its Arctic territories. Canada's investment in JORN radar and other defense systems reflects its growing concern over Arctic sovereignty. The country is also increasing its naval presence in the region and enhancing its search and rescue capabilities, particularly as the area becomes more accessible to ships navigating the melting ice. The ongoing tensions between the US and Canada have raised serious questions about the future of their military alliance. NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, has long been the cornerstone of US-Canada defense cooperation, providing shared aerospace defense and early warning systems for North America. However, with the growing rift between the two nations, the future of NORAD and joint defense operations is uncertain. Canada's increasing focus on self-sufficiency in defense, illustrated by its purchases of French submarines and the Journe radar system, signals a reduction in reliance on US military technology and joint defense initiatives. This shift could have far-reaching consequences for the effectiveness of NORAD, which has traditionally relied on seamless cooperation between Canadian and American forces to protect North American airspace. In response to growing tensions with the United States, especially following the imposition of tariffs by President Trump, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced that Canada is working toward having free internal trade across all provinces by July 1st, 2025. This move is part of Canada's broader strategy to reduce its dependence on the US in the face of mounting trade barriers. The US tariffs, which have been imposed under questionable justifications, such as claims about immigration and drugs, have pressured Canada to seek new avenues for economic growth. Carney's initiative aims to establish a more unified and independent Canadian internal market, fostering trade between provinces without the complexities and barriers that traditionally hindered interprovincial commerce. Canada's efforts to implement free internal trade signify a critical step in reducing vulnerabilities to US economic policies and will strengthen Canada's economic resilience by fostering domestic collaboration and reducing external dependency. President Trump has made headlines again with a major policy decision that revokes the legal status of 530,000 immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. These individuals, many of whom had temporary protected status, TPS, in the US, now face the looming threat of deportation due to changes in immigration policies. This decision reflects Trump's ongoing hardline stance on immigration and comes at a time when political tensions are already high in the US. The revocation affects many immigrants who have been living and working in the US for years, contributing to the economy and communities. Critics argue that this move is a continuation of Trump's broader approach to reducing immigration and asserting stricter borders, especially concerning countries that the administration perceives as unstable. The revocation of TPS status for over 500,000 individuals sends a strong message about the Trump administration's stance on immigration, marking a significant shift that will have both social and political ramifications in the US. In a developing legal case, a federal judge has questioned whether to extend the block on the Trump administration's deportation policies, which were put in place to prevent mass deportations of individuals in the US under the administration's controversial expedited removal program. The judge expressed frustration over the administration's legal tactics, criticizing their handling of the case and labeling the arguments as disrespectful. This legal battle is crucial, as the deportations could potentially affect millions of immigrants living in the US under various legal statuses. The outcome of the case could determine the future of deportation policy and the rights of individuals facing removal, with significant political and human rights implications. The ongoing legal battles over deportations reflect the deepening divisions over immigration policy in the US and could set important precedents for future policies and court rulings regarding the treatment of undocumented immigrants. The once strong bond between the United States and Canada is facing its most significant challenge in decades. As Canada shifts its defense posture, diversifies its partnerships, and reasserts its sovereignty, it sends a clear message. Canada is no longer content with being just a neighbor to the US. The coming years will define the future of Canada's foreign and defense policies. Will it embrace autonomy, or will it return to its old ways? The world is watching closely as this pivotal moment unfolds.
In a surprising turn, Canada has chosen to cancel a $19 billion deal with Lockheed Martin to acquire 88 F-35 fighter jets, a decision that is part of a broader shift in its defense and trade relations. This represents a major shift in their defense strategies, pulling away from traditional reliance on the United States and looking toward Europe for military and economic partnership. This decision is particularly significant considering the historical context of North America's defense agreements, most notably Canada's close ties with the U.S. Since January 2023, Canada signed a $19 billion deal with Lockheed Martin to acquire 88 F-35 fighter jets, a move that many saw as a commitment to American defense systems. Portugal, too, has followed a similar path, withdrawing from the F-35 program and signaling a break from U.S. influence. These decisions come against the backdrop of a changing global defense environment and a growing desire among countries to gain more control over their own defense policies, especially in light of the political uncertainties of the Trump administration, strict tariff policies, and shifting global alliances. Today we explore what this means for Canada, Portugal, the United States, and the growing influence of the European Union in military and economic matters. The key factor driving this decision lies in the trade and political tensions between Canada and the U.S. under the leadership of Donald Trump. Trump's protectionist trade policies and his imposition of severe tariffs on Canadian goods created a rift in what was once a close economic and military relationship between the two countries. The protectionist stance taken by the Trump administration made it clear to Canada that reliance on U.S. defense systems was no longer a secure or sustainable option. The political instability associated with Trump's foreign policies, especially his unpredictable stance on trade, defense agreements, and international diplomacy, pushed Canada to reconsider its reliance on the United States for national security. Canada's choice to walk away from the F-35 deal reflects its desire for more independence in making military decisions, reducing its dependence on a single partner, especially one that is prone to abrupt policy changes. This move is also part of a broader trend among U.S. allies seeking alternative defense options that do not involve being overly reliant on the U.S. This development underscores the increasing realization among nations like Canada and Portugal that they need to pursue more flexible, autonomous defense solutions in order to better safeguard their national security. Canada's decision to cancel the F-35.
Okay, we begin in Washington, where President Donald Trump is uttering more threats against Canada and talking about who should run Canada.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports into the country, saying the move would spur growth in the American economy.
The geopolitical dynamics of North America are undergoing a massive transformation. In a stunning turn of events, Canada, once seen as a stalwart ally of the United States, is now considering a radical shift in its international affiliations. For decades, Canada and the U.S. have shared a robust relationship, economically, militarily, and diplomatically. However, recent developments, particularly under President Donald Trump, have forced Canada to reassess its position on the global stage. A 2025 survey by Abacus Data revealed that 44% of Canadians now support the idea of joining the European Union. At first glance, this may sound far-fetched. After all, Canada is geographically distant from Europe, and the EU has traditionally been reserved for European nations. But the rise in Canadian support for this idea highlights just how serious the fallout from U.S. policies has been. The trigger for this shift was the escalating trade tensions between the Trump administration and Canada. Trump's imposition of 50% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports from Canada and the 25% tax on electricity from Ontario marked a significant breakdown in their economic relationship. These measures were seen as punitive and highly damaging to Canadian industries, and they followed Trump's controversial statements suggesting that Canada's value to the U.S. was minimal. Trump's rhetoric crossed a line when he publicly stated that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States, implying that the country was a financial burden on the U.S., despite the critical economic and trade ties between the two. This rhetoric was compounded by a $200 billion yearly subsidy that Trump claimed the U.S. provided to maintain Canada's economy, a claim that was not only inaccurate, but deeply offensive to Canadians. In response to these provocations, Canada didn't just react with words, it strategically shifted its foreign policy. The Canadian government started to deepen its ties with the European Union in a variety of sectors, including trade, defense, and diplomacy. This pivot was also reflected in the growing public discourse and the increasing number of Canadians calling for an official break from U.S. influence. Social media exploded with campaigns urging Canada to leave America and join Europe, signaling a broader discontent that was beginning to permeate all levels of Canadian society. Now let's explore the legal and practical aspects of such a shift. Under Article 49 of the EU Treaty, only European countries are eligible to apply for EU membership. Geographically, Canada is not in Europe. So how could this ever happen? Interestingly, the term European country is not explicitly defined in EU treaties, which leaves a certain level of ambiguity. This lack of clear definition opens a potential loophole for Canada, much like how Cyprus, despite being geographically located in Western Asia, was accepted into the EU due to its historical, cultural, and political ties to Europe. The situation with Turkey is another precedent. Despite ongoing controversies, Turkey has remained an official candidate for EU membership due to its long-standing geopolitical ties with Europe. This precedent raises the question, could Canada, with its robust democratic system, economic strength, and strong NATO membership, eventually be welcomed into the EU despite geographical barriers? Now the question arises, what would it take for Canada to become a member of the European Union? On the surface, Canada seems like an ideal candidate. It is a longtime NATO ally, shares similar values with EU nations, and boasts a strong market economy. Additionally, Canada's bilingual nature, with both English and French as official languages, mirrors the diversity that the EU prides itself on. However, while Canada meets two of the three key Copenhagen criteria for EU membership, a democracy and a functioning market economy, the third criterion presents a major hurdle. The third requirement is for countries to demonstrate an ability to fully adopt EU laws and regulations. This would necessitate an overhaul of Canada's legal and regulatory systems, which would be both complex and costly. To comply with EU regulations, Canada would need to adjust its agricultural standards, tax structures, and even shift its currency from the Canadian dollar to the euro. Additionally, Canada would need to allow EU citizens freedom of movement within its borders, essentially opening up the country's immigration policies to European workers and residents. This represents a significant change to Canada's immigration framework, which currently prioritizes skilled workers, refugees, and family reunification. Perhaps the most significant challenge to full membership would be the potential reduction of the power of Canada's Supreme Court in certain areas, as EU membership requires countries to give the European Court of Justice precedence in legal matters. This would be a substantial compromise for Canada, a country that values its judicial independence. Full EU membership may prove too politically unfeasible due to these hurdles, but that doesn't mean Canada has no options. It could potentially explore alternative models that would align it closer to Europe without the full membership commitment. Given the challenges of full EU membership, Canada could instead adopt a model similar to other non-EU countries that have extensive ties with the European Union. Let's examine a few possible alternatives. The Norway model. Norway, although not an EU member, has access to the EU's single market and follows many of its laws. This model would allow Canada to integrate with the EU economically, without fully committing to political integration. The downside of this model is that Norway has no voting rights in EU decision-making, which limits its influence over key EU policies. Nevertheless, it offers significant economic benefits by allowing free trade and a high degree of alignment with EU regulations. The Switzerland model. Switzerland, similarly, is not an EU member, but it has developed hundreds of bilateral agreements with the EU. This model offers more flexibility than Norway's, but comes with a major drawback. The agreements require years of negotiations and are prone to delays and deadlock. Canada could choose this model, which would grant it preferential access to the European market, though it would require significant diplomatic effort to secure the necessary agreements. The post-Brexit UK model. Following the Brexit referendum, the UK no longer enjoys full EU membership, but has struck a Trade and Cooperation Agreement, TCA, that ensures continued cooperation in trade and defense. While this model grants the UK access to some of the benefits of EU membership, it does not afford the UK the full privileges of the EU single market. Canada could pursue a similar path, but would likely have to negotiate a similar agreement to ensure smooth trade relations with the EU. In any of these models, Canada could maintain a strong economic relationship with the EU, but would likely lose the full political influence that comes with membership. However, this is a trade-off that Canada might be willing to make, especially if the economic benefits outweigh the political sacrifices. Prime Minister Mark Carney has expressed a desire to elevate Canada's relationship with the EU to new heights. But if this happens, the ripple effects will be felt not only in economic terms, but also in the defense and geopolitical spheres. If Canada moves closer to the EU, it could signal a shift away from traditional US influence in favor of deeper engagement with Europe. This would mark a fundamental change in North American geopolitics, one that could have profound consequences for the United States. If Canada aligns more closely with Europe, the ramifications will be significant, not just economically, but also in terms of defense and global influence. Let's break down the potential fallout from this realignment and explore what it would mean for the U.S. economic impact. The first and most immediate consequence would be the economic impact on the U.S. If Canada moves closer to the EU, it could introduce trade barriers that would hurt U.S. businesses. This could lead to loss of access for American companies to the Canadian market, especially in sectors like automotive manufacturing, agriculture, and technology. With tariffs and trade barriers in place, U.S. companies would face higher costs and could potentially lose key markets in Canada. For instance, the automotive industry in the U.S. could experience significant setbacks, as Canadian manufacturers might shift their supply chains to Europe, or Canadian consumers might turn to European products, reducing demand for American-made vehicles. This would be a direct hit to American industries that rely heavily on Canadian exports. Defense and geopolitical impact. In addition to economic shifts, there would be defense implications. Canada's strategic location in the Arctic gives it significant importance in global defense strategy. If Canada aligns with the EU, it could lead to a weakening of U.S. influence in the Arctic, allowing Europe to gain a stronger foothold in the region. This could undermine American power in an area that has become increasingly important as climate change opens up new shipping routes and resource exploration. Symbolic impact. Perhaps the most damaging consequence would be the symbolic blow to U.S. global influence. If Canada, once considered the U.S.'s closest ally, chooses to align itself more closely with Europe than with Washington, it would send a powerful message to the world. This could create a deep fracture in the Western alliance, which has been the cornerstone of post-World War II global order. The U.S. would lose a valuable ally and could face growing global skepticism about its leadership on the world stage. In recent weeks, President Donald Trump has intensified trade tensions by imposing significant tariffs on imports from key allies and adversaries alike. These actions have sent shockwaves through global markets and elicited sharp reactions from affected nations. On March 26, 2025, President Trump announced a 25% tariff on all imported vehicles, including cars and light trucks. This measure aims to bolster domestic manufacturing by discouraging foreign-made vehicles and encouraging production within the United States. However, the move has faced criticism and potential retaliatory measures from trading partners such as Canada, the European Union, and Japan. Concerns have been raised about increased vehicle prices and disrupted supply chains, which could adversely affect consumers and the automotive industry. In a related development, Senator Steve Daines, a staunch ally of President Trump, visited Beijing to lay the groundwork for a forthcoming summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. During his visit, Senator Daines met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang and emphasized the US's concerns regarding China's role in the fentanyl crisis. This diplomatic effort underscores the complexity of US-China relations, intertwining trade issues with critical public health concerns. The Chinese government has expressed strong objections to the U.S.'s linkage of fentanyl trafficking to trade policies. Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Xi Feng, criticized the U.S. for using fentanyl as a pretext to impose tariffs, warning that this approach could transform a potential area of cooperation into a point of conflict. He emphasized the importance of constructive engagement and mutual respect in addressing complex issues like drug trafficking. These developments highlight the multifaceted nature of contemporary partners such as Canada, the European Union, and Japan. Concerns have been raised about increased vehicle prices and disrupted supply chains, which could adversely affect consumers and the automotive industry. In a related development, Senator Steve Daines, a staunch ally of President Trump, visited Beijing to lay the groundwork for a forthcoming summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. During his visit, Senator Daines met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang and emphasized the U.S.'s concerns regarding China's role in the fentanyl crisis. This diplomatic effort underscores the complexity of U.S.-China relations, intertwining trade issues with critical public health concerns. The Chinese government has expressed strong objections to the U.S.'s linkage of fentanyl trafficking to trade policies. Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Xi Feng, criticized the U.S. for using fentanyl as a pretext to impose tariffs, warning that this approach could transform a potential area of cooperation into a point of conflict. He emphasized the importance of constructive engagement and mutual respect in addressing complex issues like drug trafficking. These developments highlight the multifaceted nature of contemporary international relations, where trade policies, national security concerns, and public health issues are deeply interconnected. The actions taken by the Trump administration have not only strained relations with traditional allies, but have also complicated efforts to address global challenges collaboratively. In conclusion, the geopolitical shift we are witnessing between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico is reshaping North American relations. Canada's move towards the EU and Mexico's retaliatory measures are sending clear signals to the U.S. These developments could result in a major realignment of global power, challenging the status quo and threatening U.S. economic and geopolitical dominance. As we move forward, we must ask, how far will these tensions escalate, and what will be the long-term consequences for global stability? Stay tuned for more updates as this complex situation unfolds. In a surprising and bold move, Canada has made the decision to halt its $130 billion oil export pipeline to the U.S., an action that immediately shocked Washington and sent tremors through the global energy market. The relationship between Canada and the United States has been a cornerstone of North American trade, particularly in the energy sector. For decades, Canada has been the largest supplier of energy to the U.S., with the two nations enjoying a strong economic partnership built on shared resources, mutual benefits, and reliable trade. This move is not just a response to a momentary disagreement, but a carefully considered strategic economic decision that could shift the balance of power in the global energy sector. The long-standing partnership between the two nations is now facing its most significant rupture in modern history. The result? A dramatic surge in energy prices. Gasoline, oil, and electricity prices in the U.S. have surged to record highs, leading to widespread disruptions in everyday life. This action has created a domino effect throughout the U.S. economy, and no sector is immune. The immediate consequence is the shock to U.S. consumers, who are seeing significant price hikes in essential goods and services. Gas prices are skyrocketing, and with it, the costs of food and public services. For the average American, these price hikes are impacting daily activities, from commuting to work to purchasing groceries and flying to destinations. Even more alarming, this energy crisis is just the beginning of what promises to be a long-term challenge that could have repercussions for millions of people in the United States. As energy prices soar, the impact on U.S. industries is immediate and profound. The aviation industry is one of the first sectors to feel the sting, as higher fuel costs lead to increased airfares, reducing demand for flights and making air travel unaffordable for many Americans. Meanwhile, the transportation industry, which depends heavily on affordable fuel, sees its operations crippled. Trucking companies, shipping services, and manufacturing plants all face increased costs, leading to disruptions in the supply chain and higher prices for finished goods. This increase in energy prices is not just a temporary inconvenience, it's a major economic shock that ripples through all facets of life. Transport, manufacturing, and other industries are now being forced to rethink their operational strategies in light of the rising costs. For many, it means that their profit margins are being squeezed and their production costs are climbing, all of which are being passed down to consumers. While consumers are feeling the immediate pain of rising prices, businesses are facing severe challenges as well. Manufacturers are particularly hard hit, as they rely on stable energy costs to keep operations running smoothly. From factories to supply chains, the entire industrial base of the U.S. is struggling. But perhaps the most concerning aspect of this crisis is that it's not just about energy. This is a broader issue that could further destabilize the U.S. economy, leading to an even larger financial and political crisis. With the U.S. now facing a critical energy crisis, Europe and Asia are stepping up to fill the void left by Canada's withdrawal. The shift in global energy markets is more profound than it might seem. While the U.S. once relied heavily on Canada's oil exports, this partnership is now on the brink of collapse. Canada's new energy strategy involves seeking out new, more lucrative markets, particularly in China and India, the world's largest and fastest-growing energy consumers. For Canada, this is more than just an economic reaction. It's a strategic long-term pivot. Over the past several years, Canada had warned the U.S. that its energy supply dominance would not last forever, especially as global demand for energy continues to rise in markets outside of North America. In signing long-term contracts with China and India, Canada is securing itself a future where it is no longer beholden to the U.S. for its economic stability. This global pivot means that Canada is now positioning itself as a global energy powerhouse, with plans to shift energy exports to Europe and Asia. In a world where energy security is becoming a central issue, Canada's decision to diversify its energy customers could change the geopolitical landscape forever. This not only impacts North American trade, but also shapes the future of global energy markets, potentially disrupting traditional power structures and offering new opportunities for countries outside of North America to step into the spotlight as dominant energy players. The consequences of Canada's decision are being felt across the U.S. almost immediately, and the fallout is far-reaching. States like New York, California, and Michigan are facing the very real risk of rolling blackouts, especially as winter approaches. Without access to Canada's hydroelectric power, these states could see their energy grids overwhelmed, leading to widespread outages and disruptions to daily life. The price of electricity has skyrocketed, leaving many Americans scrambling to pay their bills and adjust to the new normal of higher utility costs. But the energy crisis is just one part of the story. The economic consequences of this disruption are profound. Industries that rely on cheap and abundant energy are already scaling back their operations due to rising energy costs. Manufacturing plants are reducing their output, and the automobile industry, which consumes vast amounts of energy in the production process, is facing a slowdown that could have long-term effects on U.S. employment. The situation is compounded by the fact that the U.S. was not prepared for this disruption. Washington's failure to heed Canada's warnings and its reliance on Canadian energy has left the U.S. vulnerable to this sudden shock. The American economy is now grappling with inflation, rising energy costs, and the potential for job losses in energy-dependent sectors. While many are searching for a quick solution, it's becoming clear that the U.S. will have to make significant changes to its energy strategy or risk enduring long-term consequences. The U.S. is now entering what analysts are calling a challenging energy winter, as the country faces an energy crisis of unprecedented proportions. This is not a temporary glitch. This is a fundamental shift in how the country will manage its energy needs moving forward. Everything from gas, oil, and electricity to goods and airline tickets has seen prices surge in recent months, and the impact on everyday families and businesses has been swift and devastating. The inflationary pressures that are being created by these soaring energy prices are starting to squeeze household budgets, as families are forced to pay more for essentials like food, electricity, and fuel. For many businesses, this price surge is causing serious headaches. Companies that rely on low-cost energy to operate are seeing their profits evaporate as production costs climb. Small businesses in particular are being hit hard as they struggle to absorb the rising costs while trying to maintain competitive prices. But the crisis is not just economic, it is also a question of survival. As the U.S. energy system becomes increasingly unreliable, Americans are beginning to fear the worst. The specter of rolling blackouts, unaffordable fuel, and the loss of jobs in energy-dependent industries is forcing Americans to face a new reality. The energy systems they once took for granted are no longer stable, and Washington's efforts to alleviate the situation seem ineffective. The stakes are high. The U.S. economy is facing a moment of reckoning, and it's unclear what path Washington will take to recover from this crisis. Will it find alternative energy sources quickly enough? Or will the disruptions continue to destabilize the economy for years to come? The answers remain uncertain, but one thing is clear. America is in the midst of an energy crisis unlike any it has seen in modern history. As the energy crisis continues to unfold, President Donald Trump's response to Canada's actions has been nothing short of chaotic. In the face of an economic and political challenge, Trump has escalated tensions even further by threatening Canada with a 100% tariff on cars. This outburst has heightened the already tense trade relations between the two nations and further undermined any potential diplomatic resolution to the crisis. Trump's rhetoric has shifted from concern to confrontation, with the president directly threatening Canada's auto industry, one of the country's most important economic sectors. Trump has demanded that Canada act to stop migrants crossing the northern border, threatening to impose steep tariffs on Canadian-made cars if Canada fails to act. This aggressive posture is just the beginning of a full-scale trade conflict between the two nations. However, Canada has responded firmly. Prime Minister Mark Carney issued a forceful rebuttal to Trump's threats, emphasizing that no amount of economic pressure would make Canada abandon its sovereignty. Canada's leaders have made it clear that they will not bow to U.S. demands, and they have rebuffed any suggestions of becoming a subservient trade partner. This stance on sovereignty marks a turning point in the relationship, as Canada shifts its focus away from reliance on the U.S. and towards greater independence in its political and economic strategies. In a dramatic display of defiance, Canada has even reopened its military strategy and is considering alternatives to U.S. defense contracts, including the F-35 fighter jets deal. The Canadian government's decision to reassess its military relationship with the U.S. signals that the trade dispute is not just about energy, it's about asserting Canada's political and economic autonomy on the world stage. In a move that underscores the Trump administration's America First agenda, the United States has suspended its financial contributions to the World Trade Organization, WTO. This decision aligns with broader efforts to reduce government spending and reassess commitments to international institutions. The U.S., traditionally a significant contributor, was expected to provide about 11% of the WTO's 2024 budget, amounting to approximately 22.7 million Swiss francs. This suspension places the U.S. under Category 1 arrears, limiting its representatives' roles in WTO bodies. The halt in funding raises concerns about the World Trade Organization's operational capacity and the potential long-term implications for global trade dynamics. U.S. airlines, once optimistic about a sustained period of profitability, are now confronting significant challenges. The combination of President Trump's broad tariffs and a crackdown on government spending has led to reduced consumer and corporate travel expenditures. This shift in spending behavior has prompted airlines to revise their profit forecasts downward and adjust flight capacities. The S&P 500 Passenger Airlines Index has declined by 15% this year, with major carriers like Delta and United Airlines experiencing stock drops of approximately 20%. While premium and international travel bookings remain relatively stable, domestic demand has slowed, partly due to economic uncertainty and safety concerns. Airlines are closely monitoring these trends, as prolonged demand weakness could necessitate further capacity reductions and impact profitability. the U.S. suspension of WTO contributions, and the challenges facing U.S. airlines have elicited varied responses from international partners. European stock markets have reacted to U.S. trade tensions, with significant declines in automotive shares following the announcement of a 25% tariff on car imports. Companies like BMW, Volkswagen, and General Motors have seen their stock values affected, reflecting concerns over potential trade disruptions. In the aviation sector, global carriers are observing the U.S. airline industry's struggles, assessing the impact on international travel demand, and adjusting strategies accordingly. These developments highlight the interconnectedness of global markets and the far-reaching consequences of policy decisions made by major economies. Beyond the corporate sector, consumer behavior is exhibiting signs of economic caution. Indicators such as reduced dining out, shifts in shopping habits towards bulk purchases at discount retailers like Costco, and lower traffic levels suggest a tightening of household budgets. These changes reflect growing consumer uncertainty and a shift towards more conservative spending. Such behaviors are often precursors to broader economic slowdowns, as decreased consumer spending can lead to reduced business revenues and potential job losses. Monitoring these trends provides valuable insights into the economic climate and can inform both policy decisions and business strategies. In contrast to the challenges faced by the broader travel industry, the luxury travel segment is experiencing growth. Increased bookings among high-income consumers, driven by factors such as record stock market gains and rising real estate values, are providing a positive sign for the economy. Travel agencies report higher average booking values, and networks like Virtuoso are seeing substantial yearly growth in high-value bookings. This trend underscores the resilience of affluent consumers and their continued willingness to spend on premium travel experiences, even amid broader economic uncertainties. The luxury travel market is expected to grow by 5.2% in 2025, bolstering economic confidence. The convergence of trade policy shifts, airline industry challenges, changing consumer behaviors, and sector-specific growth areas presents a complex economic landscape. Businesses and policymakers must navigate these crosswinds with strategic foresight, balancing protectionist measures with the need for international cooperation. Adaptability and resilience will be crucial as industries adjust to evolving demand patterns and policy environments. The ability to pivot in response to economic signals, invest in innovation, and maintain consumer trust will determine success in this dynamic climate. In conclusion, the U.S. is facing a massive economic and geopolitical shift. Canada's decision to cut off energy supplies is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. As the world transitions into a more independent and multipolar global landscape, the U.S. must adapt or risk losing its place at the top. This ongoing energy and trade war is far from over, and it's clear that the consequences will be felt for years.